I didn't have a shower today because I was late for work, so I had to run in. I hope you're all keeping very well. It's the end of July 2023, and it's a nice morning. It's nice and gentle, comfortable, sort of like almost delightful vibe to it, even though it's not sunny. It's quite pleasant. That's what I'll take. So, excuse me, clear my throat. I want to talk about the necessity of woo. By that I mean the incorporation of the fantastical and, to many people, the absurd into one's life. Mainly because I want to talk about it anyway. And secondly, I think, well, Hocus Focus starts tonight at 8 p.m. on Sarah Monteini's channel, so that's another reason. And thirdly, I think we're reaching a time where people are now turning away from the materialistic scientism, Richard Dawkins, the gorgeous Brian Cox thing, and into something a bit more meaningful. Because when you think about the period, before 2020, there was a run of pushing materialistic science only stuff into her face non-stop 24/7. Okay, so you had Richard Dawkins constantly on TV saying there's nothing beyond the material, blah 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 blah. You have then Brian Cox later on, other ones, and Bill Nye and all these people. It's only science, there's nothing else. That black dude in America, I quite like. He's actually kind of a cool guy. I forget his name. He's not that famous on this side of the Atlantic, but he is in America. And so on. Now, then after they had their like propaganda leading up to 2020. Then after 2020 to 2023 now, they rolled out their scientism, materialistic society with the lockdowns and the Rona and all that. And they were all constantly told science will save us, science will get us out of this, and then the needlecraft and all that stuff. Sorry, I didn't get enough sleep last night. The needlecraft and all that stuff. Science will save us, blah 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 blah, and trust the science and all this stuff. And in the end, it all turned out to be a sham. People were still getting sick after 2 or 3 doses. And now they're all fully aware, even though many of them won't admit it, that they're dropping dead left, right and centre from the needlecraft. Myocarditis and everything else. And then people are very wary as why these same people who claim to be science-driven were laughing at wonder drugs like ivermectin. And also the climate change thing, like the nonsense of that, that's so apparent into a free-thinking mind. So you're being lied to there. And now we have a situation where people are returning to religion and spirituality. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with exploring yourself and things like that. And this was a natural process that was always going to happen. If you look at the writings of like H.P. Lovecraft, he wrote a book called an essay called The Cancer of Superstition. And he came out against everything like that. But at the end of the day said it's probably real. He says psychology cannot give people the sense of the unknown, what's beyond the shadows, the mysterious, and all the gods, demons, and everything else they create to fill that void. It provides an extremely important function, and he saw his weird fiction as a continuum of this sort of like the folk traditions of, fairy tales and, mythology. He saw his work, his mythos, as the American continuation of that, which it absolutely is. That was the purpose. He says, yeah, you have to have some belief in the fantastical. See, this is why a lot of people say, a lot of people like me absolutely know for a fact, even though he never admitted it, that Lovecraft had a much stronger knowledge of working knowledge of the occult than he claimed to have. And there's probably numerous reasons for this. We know his grandfather, Whittle, was a top ranking Freemason and had a vast library of occult texts that the young Lovecraft had access to. And then but he was Mr. Materialistic, Mr. Science, He was a keenly interested in astronomy and architecture and things like that. A lot of people, I read a book recently by a guy called John D. They Laughter. I'll be reviewing on Hocus Focus at some point, and he said that H.R. Giger is the occultist that people long Lovecraft to be, and that's absolutely true. I think that's why people who are into Lovecraftian stuff are also into to H.R. Giger. And at some level, you believe that the xenomorphs from Alien are real. At some level, you believe that Cthulhu is real. Because on some cosmic psychic level, they are. Now, you say to yourself, okay, that possibly doesn't have anything beyond a sort of a sense of artistic wonderment, a chance to create something different. Does it have a real practical use? Well, absolutely it does. It allows you to conceptualize things outside the paradigm. Because if I went to Necronomicon in Providence, and the overwhelming majority of people there were simply cold, hard fans of the fiction. They would not, for a second, think that there was something more deeper to this, and some of them did. But most of them didn't, and that's okay. That was their approach to the hobby, or the interest, we're going to call it, their pursuit, their passion. Now, here's another thing. Not you can appreciate Mozart without knowing how to write sheet music, but there's also people who understand sheet music, intonation, everything to do with the creation of music, but don't really feel it. That's quite a common thing in music colleges and art colleges. There are people who understand the technicals of the actual creative process, but don't have the the demon or the muse inside them. So, demon, same thing, genius. And I'll tell you, here's a practical example of how stepping beyond has helped me. I don't think this is our first flirtation with transhumanism. Not at all. Not at all. And I'll tell you why. I was exploring years ago, about 11 years ago, I was exploring the rocks in the coastal area up in Donegal around Bundoran. And that would have been, stuff from Precambrian time, Cambrian time. These were rocks. This was like, the edge of it, the bottom of an ocean millions and millions of years ago. And so many of the fossils looked like machines or pieces of machines. And that was the confirmation to me of what they call intelligent design was actually the first attempts at transhumanism in some vast ancient past to create machines that were biological, so biomechanical machines, xenomorphs type things. And I think what we call many of the creatures today that are used to, as proof, here's natural selection, that flea that has the hind legs that has a ratchet system with cogs. And when it jumps, the ratchet goes like that. That thing is a machine. That thing is absolutely, nature couldn't develop an engineering system like that. Just by natural selection. I don't believe that for a minute. I believe that's probably a survivor from an ancient time where there was a biomechanical culture, shall we say, that was somehow destroyed, and it's in our racial memories and so on. I'll give you another example. The first time I saw a horseshoe crab, I was at a friend's house in Massapequa in Long Island. A guy used to kind of band with, and his dad had a boat. At the end of their garden, there was a canal, a dock, that led out to the sea, the ocean. And there was a boat at the end of the garden in a canal type thing. And I went over there and I'm looking in the water and I says, what the fuck is that? And I see this thing that looks like a German World War II helmet with a tail coming out the back. And he says, they're horseshoe crabs. You never seen one? I said, never even heard of one. And I said, are they dangerous or poisonous? And he says, no. So I jumped into the water and swam down and grabbed one. About picked him up like this, excuse me, and its body looked like, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I said, this is like a machine. Its body looked like it had been injected, molded inside. It looked like a spaceship or something. The body, the shell, looked like it had been injected, molded, okay? And it didn't, the way it was so smooth and almost aerodynamic, it looked like an injection molding machine had made it, or a 3D printer. And then the tail was like almost like very strange, like an armadillo tail. And then when I turned the thing over, it had these legs that were like mechanical. They looked like the like the kind of things in a loom or something, an electric loom, grabbing the. It looked. I said, this thing is a fucking space alien. Threw it back in the water, and we all laughed. And that was like that was the opening the door for me. That thing, did nature make that? Or was that made by some kind of previous intelligent society? So that was like Lovecraftian, Giger kind of like world for me. There are certain animals, particularly in the sea, and when you look at fossils, so many of them look like machines. That maybe that's what they were. They were biomechanical thingies from an ancient, far ancient civilization. And so I wouldn't have been able to make that leap. And something I still kind of, I'm not going to say I believe it, but it's something I'm constantly exploring in the background. And I would not have been able to make that leap without my kind of appreciation and belief in woo. Because the woo created a sense of, psychic exploration beyond the now, beyond the material world. And that psychic explanation, sorry, allowed me to pick up a horseshoe crab when I was like 19 or 20 and look at the thing and say, this is a fucking machine. Everything about it is mechanical. And, that was all part of the whole octopus thing, my fascination with octopuses and so on. And occasionally you will often see people from UFO and ancient alien groups posting fossils. And they'll say, look at this ancient piece of an ancient spaceship. And people are going, oh, that's a fossil, it's a fossilized worm or something like that. And then I look at them and say, I don't blame them for thinking that. That looks like a piece of machinery. That looks like it was made in a lathe or something. And why did we have these early forms of life on this planet that looked like biomechanicals? And lo and behold, years later, when I studied Lovecraft and Giger, I found out that they were both incredibly influenced by these ancient Cambrian and Precambrian fossils. Collect these fossilized creatures. The facehugger in Alien was directly connected with that. It was looking at images of fossils, and so is so much of Lovecraft's work. There are fossilized octopuses and everything out there. So the belief in woo made me think about things differently. And this is why we have so little creativity in the world today. And that's what there's been no scientific advances in decades. Yes, there's been miniaturization. There's been, you know, greater application of existing technologies, but microchips have been around now since the 1960s. There's been nothing new really. We're still getting rockets into space, is still putting a bomb under something's ass and blowing it up to try and get it out of the Earth's orbit. There's been no real nothing. I mean, people say electric cars. Electric cars were all over Dublin when I was a kid. They were electric vans delivering milk and bread. They were everywhere. And 100 years ago, there were electric cars and electric trains and everything. So there's nothing new about any of that stuff. It's because they're pumping them out of college today saying there's nothing beyond this. There's nothing beyond the periodic table. There's nothing beyond natural selection. There's nothing beyond the human nervous system. And as a result, science has been held back greatly because the ability to dream is gone. The ability to walk that extra step into the world of woo has been taken from them. And this is why I think there's a great benefit in that. Like, I mean, how many of you look at those fossils watching this and said they look like machines? I mean, a horseshoe crab, good God, think about that one. But anyway, yeah, so that's the importance of woo, and that's also something I don't think I've ever spoken about this on camera before. Is it does look to me like this, that the earliest forms of life on this planet, in terms of complex life, look to me like they're machine made. And this may not be our first foray into transhumanism. This may be just the latest. So look after yourselves, and I'll see you tonight in Hocus Focus.